It's my honor to bring one of the 2019 Mad Cave Talent Search winners and the author of the upcoming, I'm going to call it a smash hit because I've already read it and the book is amazing, book Dryfoot from Mad Cave Studios, Jarred Lujan.
When I'm flying in a plane or I'm on the street, there's a lot of famous people that I like to meet. They shake my hand and never ask my name, and they start asking questions that are always the same. Hey.
Hi, Jarred. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'll give you a round of applause for all of the illustrious announcement. So the way I interview kind of folks, I want to talk to you about what comics means to you outside of your individual creation, and then clearly we'll focus on your upcoming book. Okay. So the first question I have for you, if folks are not familiar with Mad Cave, with the talent search, or with the killer like press and connection with fans that you've been doing on Twitter, can you give me a brief rundown of who Jarred is as an author, as a person, as anything inside or outside of comics?
Yeah, so I'm a pretty simple guy, I think. I'm just a guy. I live in Texas, right? So that's always got, I think that was like the first thing I said in one of my other interviews, is that I was like, I'm from Texas, you know, because that's our whole identity. But I like, you know, I just really enjoy, you know, movies and storytelling of all kinds. But really, I think that there's not like a ton more to me. You know, I'm just a guy who really likes Twitter and really likes comics and storytelling. And so writing them helps me. And, you know, the two just kind of feed into each other. I just get to be on Twitter all the time and promoting my book that I also had a really good time writing.
As a Kansan who may be biased against Texans, you know, I'll say that your description of "I'm just a guy from Texas" is pretty on par with everybody. You said that comics helps you kind of as that mode of expression, that you enjoy comics. So what brought you into this world of comics as a medium?
It's kind of like a long story. I'll try and shorten it down so we're not here like all day. But so I was like, as a kid, I was really big into reading in general. Really liked, you know, mythology. I was super into anime, storytelling in general, like visual, mostly visual. Like I liked anime a lot. I love movies. Movies have been a long time thing for me. I was really active in my high school drama club for all 4 years. I really enjoyed doing stuff like that. But comics I was in and out of for like 10 years. Okay. I was big into the big two stuff for like many of those years. And I just kept getting in and out of it. I think like at one point I was like 17 and had my first job and decided I wanted to spend that money on other things instead of comics. And then the next time I had like a bunch of money, I was working and I was in college. I guess I was like 20, 21. I was spending way too much money on comics, and then I was broke as hell all the time. So I had to give it up then. But when I was like, it must have been 6 years ago, I got back, or it was actually 4 or 5. I got back into it, and I got really into the indie stuff. And that's where like the light clicked, where I was like, yeah, no, this is the stuff that I like. This is the stuff that I really enjoy. I think indie comics has just been like my whole thing for several years. It was just like that lightning bolt where I was like, yeah, no, this is what I want to read. This is the stuff I want to look at. There's so much good stuff out in the indie scene. It's crazy. And so, but it's the indie stuff that kept me coming back. You know, obviously I'm a little bit better off with money. You know, I don't have kids, you know, and I'm out of college. So, so I have a little bit of extra money line, but it was really like the indie stuff I was just taken away by, and I just haven't stopped since.
What kind of stuff do you like to read, either from the realm of comics or any kind of literature beyond, either as a fan or as a source for kind of a muse to help you figure out a story vehicle?
Yeah, so comics wise, I'm into like Gideon Falls has been one of my favorite titles for I guess almost 2 years now, or almost over that. I think Gideon Falls is genius. The way that it presents, the way it uses the medium is really, I think, like second to none. It's a genius move. But like I also read, you know, I was a big fan of These Savage Shores, was another one of my favorites. I really like Once and Future from Once and Future is good.
That's in my pile to check out. Like literally as soon as we're done, I think I have Lemire's Smile Killer, and then Once and Future are the next two in my stack.
Dude, Once and Future is good stuff. But like one of the other books that I'm really into right now that nobody else has read because they also got delayed is Stargazer. Stargazer by my buddy Anthony Cleveland and Anthony Fuso and all those guys. You know, the art team, that was amazing. But that book is incredible.
Does that come out just before you or just after you?
It's a week before Dryfoot. But I'm really into Stargazer. I'm really excited for the second issue. I read it like a while back, so I have a while to wait for the second issue. But like I've also been reading a ton of trades, so to help like my comic shop during the shutdowns here in Texas, which obviously didn't go too well because we stopped. But my comic shop in the Diamond shutdown, I was buying trades by like in 2 or 3. Whatever he could get me. So I got super into East of West. I got really into Black Science. I'm about to start working on Why the Last Man. So I've been like pretty deep into the comics thing lately, especially. I haven't been reading as much because I've been working on promoting Dryfoot. So I've got like an issue of Gideon Falls that's just making me feel bad, sitting off in a corner.
Thank you for, you know, introducing me and my small but mighty audience to who you are. And the real reason why you're here is to talk about Dryfoot. I've read it. I think the story is fascinating for so many reasons. So for the folks who didn't watch the Mad Cave product release, the people who don't follow new books, new authors outside of the big 2 or 3 on Twitter, people who haven't stupidly like lied to you or Chris and been like, yeah, I'm a comic reviewer, I would like to read this book for free. Can you give me the Cliff Notes version of either Dryfoot #1 or kind of the things we would expect to see in the story for people who aren't glued into what's going on?
So Dryfoot is a story about 4 teenage friends who, you know, live in 1980s Miami's Little Havana. Little Havana was a real violent place in 1984. Lots of drugs, lots of gang wars, and our group of teenagers decide that, you know, they don't want to live in that environment. They want to escape that. They want to go out west and do something with their lives, do something big and ambitious and all of that. And so the 4 of them decide that together they're going to rob the local drug lord and take cash and escape in a sort of like valiant burn your bridges exit, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, in terms of like the greater what to expect from it, that I'm gonna be real numb on that because I think that there's a lot of twists and turns and there's a lot of emotion in the book, and I really want people to go into that and feel it.
Well, and I think you can get that even from the first issue, right? That we learn enough about each of the teenage characters as to why they might not just want to walk away from the community, but walk away from their families, that I think, you know, even from a why you should or should not look at this from the standpoint of it being from the Latinx community, I think that becomes kind of a real intersectional kind of tale of the story of people who are from broken homes in so many different respects of the term. And I think that's what really makes it a relatable story, even if, you know, neither of us can hop in a time machine and experience 1980s Havana. And I think that's one of the really cool things about the story, that you can relate to the notion of, I don't like what's happening in my most holy of holies at home, and I need to look at something else. So I think that's something that's really cool from the book, that even you don't, those are the stories that you don't hear a lot, right? Or if it is, it's because that person is now set up to be a serial killer, a gang member, a henchman for a supervillain. So I think that's one of the things that y'all should be applauded on, for kind of creating this overarching theme of, you're at a crossroads in your life. What steps will it take you to leave home, and what barriers kind of show up in between those two? So that's something that I really enjoyed about it.
Yeah, I think the one thing that anybody could really relate to about the book is that I think all of us at some point were like teenagers who thought that we were being held back by X or Y thing.
Yeah.
I grew up, like I said, I grew up in Del Rio. The rite of passage in Del Rio as a teenager is to talk about how much you hate Del Rio, and how badly you want to leave, and and that's where I think you want to run away and do something with your life, not like everybody else in this town, like it's a pop punk song. So
that's what just popped into my head. Like, you just described every emo song that I was really into in high school and college, and that's what it is. And I think that's like a general, maybe not a universal thing, but like as a general thing, I think that a lot of people feel that way at some point in their lives. The next question I want to ask is, what's the source of inspiration, right? You mentioned Scarface earlier. I don't know how much work you had with the logo or the cover team, but there are those like little touches of Miami Vice in there. So what pushed this story for you to go, this is my first venture, this is what I want to tell?
So as the talent search winner, when I came into the fray, Chris Fernandez, who is my editor and he's now Mad Cave's publisher, and he is probably my new best friend. But I don't know if he knows that. But he said he told me they had like a general idea of what they wanted. They knew they wanted it about these 4 teens that were gonna steal some money, or I think there's a couple of other things on there that I don't want to talk about because I don't know if that's going to come into the fray down the line for them as a publisher. But they had a general idea, and they told me, like, here's kind of what we're working with. Feel free to like kind of flesh out what you have. Tell me what ideas you get from it. And so, which was super exciting because, I'm as somebody who's Latinx in America, I'm really excited that my first project is all Latinx people. Yeah. We have an entirely, almost me, Orlando, and Chris are all Latinx. Nia's from Indonesia, I think. Okay. So it was really exciting to me. The one thing I didn't want to do was, a gangland narco story, because I was like, we've got all of those. That's done. I don't need to make a comic book Scarface.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that. I don't want that. So my whole thing was, I want to do a story about, these teenagers who have ambitions and dreams beyond that life. And I grew up in Del Rio, Texas, which isn't like a totally impoverished city or anything by any means, but there's a lot of poverty there. And right now, my job, I work in a restaurant that's deep in the heart of the barrio, and I see kids that have dreams and ambitions past what they have, and I've seen that my whole life, and I think that's kind of where where that real core of the story came from, my own personal experiences and seeing, my friends and people I knew and kids that worked for me, kids that came into my restaurant, that really wanted to escape and to get out of this violent, crime-ridden area that they live in. And so I think that's one of my favorite parts about Dryfoot is that it's got really, Viejo and the Marilitos are kind of like the narco story. That's the narco story that you see all the time, and in contrast to these four kids that don't want any part of that. So I really think that that's where the core of it from. And then I spent a lot of time researching 1980s Miami, like so much time. I was reading through old newspapers, like the crimes, and like I was reading Miami's gang history, and then I was reading about Cuban immigration to Miami. I read about the Cuban Revolution and the agricultural reforms, not because any of that is like dead central to the story, but because it's part of what transformed Little Havana into Little Havana. And and in a lot of ways, I think the neighborhood is sort of a character of its own right in the story. But they really, I have a lot of really good things to say about Mad Cave in terms of how they really let me go about it, because it was pretty much like, here's an idea, like here's a general thought, take it and run with it, and I sure did.
Remind me at the end to ask you a pimp up Mad Cave question, because I know while I'm in a liberal college town in Kansas, we're fairly small, and the only book that I had gotten pre-quarantine was Knights of the Golden Sun, because I feel like that was one, I think that started before Battle Cats did and got more heat in previews. So I'll ask you sell everybody on Mad Cave question at the end.
Okay.
And I want to ask you another question before I ask you to offer the synopsis of Dryfoot, and then I'll play with the editing order of this.
Okay.
But one of the questions that I've asked folks a lot, I've interviewed someone who is writing a story about a superhero with autism. I interviewed someone who's writing a graphic novel for children about students with disabilities that are creating their own band. And, as a run-of-the-mill, cisgendered, heterosexual, middle-class white dude, I am the intersection of not having to deal with very many forms of oppression. And I think that's why, when I asked the question to some of the other authors about representation, right, that's my white privilege singing through of yeah, we should talk about people with mental illnesses, with, some forms of physical or cognitive disabilities. But I think you said a lot of very, very important things about stories of hope for the Latinx community, because we do get the narco story, the illegal immigrant story, everything that we read about here, especially in the year of our Trump 2020, right, that it's still disparaging imagery about the influence of the Latinx community. So I'm going to pause to get to the clear question instead of my white guilt showing through. So why do you feel like, either as a member of the Latinx community or even someone who would be outside of that community like me, why would a story like this be important for everybody to kind of engage in?
So, as a member of the community, I don't want to give any misconceptions that Dryfoot deals with its themes pretty heavily. I think I don't want to give anything away, but as I said, I'm a big fan of existentialism and Kierkegaard, and that means that decisions have consequences, and people, you're responsible. You make a choice and you have a responsibility that comes from that. I wanted it to hit the notes that I thought were important to hit on it, but with that said, I think that it's important to read it because one, A Little Havana I think that it's important just to read a story about someone who isn't a drug dealer, who doesn't want to be a drug dealer, who's not inmate number one, who's not a cartel member. We've had it all. And I think that Dryfoot is an exception, and it's almost the collision point of that sort of story. And so I think that's important. If not important, I think that it's new. It's different in its own right. As to why people not in the community should read it, I think that's the same. It's a similar answer in that I think people often consume media that is regularly shows Latinx people as criminals, and while maybe our group of kids aren't the shining beacons of humanity, they also don't have to be, because they're not the opposite. You're not. This isn't Tony Montana walking around here. This is a group of kids who want to move, who want to get out of this life, and they think they figured out a way how. So I think that sort of stuff is cool. I think it's that a lot of people like to talk about diversity in comics. We're having that conversation now, today. I saw that all over my Twitter feed. Mm-hmm. But very few people want to talk about the people creating that. Yeah. A lot of people are happy with Black and brown and Asian characters getting written by people that aren't members of those communities. And those communities, I'm sorry. And I think that, Orlando and I and Chris are all members of our community that we're writing about. We're also all different members of the Latinx community. I believe Chris is Cuban, Orlando's Colombian, I'm a Mexican. We also have a really, and that also reflects in the book. I saw a stupid tweet the other day that mentioned that Dryfoot looked too Mexican, and I'm like, there's not a single one in the book.
It's a book about fucking Cubans.
Yeah. We don't go to Mexicans. Florida's too far, dog. Like it's got alligators. We don't do that. But yeah. So it's just like one of those things, and we have so much of that influence. It takes place during around the time of the Gaiocho Festival, which is a celebration of the Latinx community in Miami. There's a lot of really cool stuff there. I think that, I'm not trying to sell the book on diversity. The book's good independent of it. I'm very confident in the story that all of us put together and the work that went into the book. But so I'm not sitting here saying like, buy it or you don't like us. No, I'm saying that if you're looking for a story that doesn't present brown people as drug dealers and prisoners and whatever nefarious thing, then you found one.
I want to say thank you to Jarred for spending way too much time with me on this fine evening. That this has been one of the most personally gratifying conversations I've had with an author. I think all of you who read the blog or follow me on any of my social media, that if it's a book that I don't take a active interest in, then it's going to be one of those books that I don't talk about, right? I'm not going to negatively review someone. I'm not going to give up, an hour and a half of a night away from my family to talk to someone if it's not a project that I don't believe in. So I think all of you should look at this diamond code that has been scrolling across, JUL 201276, and I need better glasses after reading that. Like, you need to demand that your shop gets this book so you can pick it up in September. It's a phenomenal story. I hope that it gets picked up for more than 4 issues, that I want to know what happens beyond the resolution. But most importantly, I want to thank Jarred for spending some time with me tonight. So thank you and have a good night.